Welcome to Two Truths, where we explore controversial topics in religion, philosophy, and history from at least two different perspectives. I'm Dr. Darren Yamarino, and today we're going to be looking at astrology, pros and cons. So we can kick off with sort of a basic definition for astrology. And in general terms, it's the attempt to ascertain hidden information about terrestrial events or human affairs through examining the positioning of various heavenly bodies, such as planets, right, stars, right, the zodiac, comets even, right, different moons. It all depends on how specific you want to get, and some of the systems get very, very elaborate. Not necessarily more accurate, but they can get more involved and complex. Okay, so that's your basic definition. For a long time, it's not really distinguished too much from astronomy until more like the 17th century, where astrology is sort of put into more of the less likely, almost pseudoscientific camp. Along with things like alchemy, perhaps, as another example, in other like occult arts, basically. It goes way, way back though. So trying to map various lunar cycles or different planets or, full on constellations coming up on the horizon in the zodiac, all this stuff goes way, way, way back in human history. At least in the Western world to about 2000 BCE, if we're going to take it into more of the Mesopotamian region. Now, there's good evidence of people tracking lunar cycles and things much further back, 25,000 years ago. But in terms of getting a little more like complex and specific, we can kind of have about 2000 BCE as a good starting point. And then the insights that are going to come from Mesopotamia are eventually going to like trickle into ancient Greece, Rome, the Islamic world, then back into Europe to more like modern attempts at understanding astrology. Right? So let's talk about some of the pros before we go into a critique. Here I think is the primary thing. We have calendars. Right? So if it wasn't for various cultures, right, looking up at the heavens, mapping, painstakingly, right? I mean, you're having to look up there all the time, every single day, and map the heavens and figure out that there are regular patterns, right? That is really what helped us even launch civilization. It allowed us to mark off time, seasons, when to plant, right? When to harvest, right? When is the sun going to be here and do this? When are we going to have longer and shorter days? Things like that. When can we hunt by moonlight or something? There's a whole variety of undeniable and obvious benefits from this sort of general enterprise that might fall under astrology. Another good one would just be thinking about like the tides, right? The effect of the moon on the tides. That's undeniable. So there's a lot of good things that we can point to that we really owe even modern day life in many ways too. But the kind of like main theme on the pro side, as far as I see it, is identifying patterns, right? Patterns harmonies, rhythm, all this stuff, very important in the ancient world because it suggests that there's some type of order and structure, which further suggests that there could be law-like behavior if we find patterns, right, in order. And if there's law-like behavior, that then even further could suggest there is a law giver, a god, or gods, right, that are wise, possibly even all-knowing, that can help to, give us a sense that there's maybe some peace of mind, right, that there's a structure to all of this whole process of reality, right? Now, I mean, on the pro side, if you want to try and go into, I think, more specifics, stuff like lunar solar eclipses, these are interesting events that obviously could have been, if you were able to predict them in the ancient world, could be utilized for even nefarious, really, purposes by those astronomers or people in the priesthood or whoever may know, or another foreign culture that's coming in and invading, right, some other land. Having knowledge of major events like that give you kind of a superiority and almost like, right, godlike wisdom or view on things. Not saying that happened all the time, right? But there are historical examples of things like that occurring. I think even with Columbus on one of the expeditions. So, knowledge is power, right? type of thing. And knowledge of the heavens is certainly seems miraculous, right? But to go beyond really like the seasonal shifts and just maybe being able to predict stuff like an eclipse or when a solstice is going to happen, it starts to get dicey when we go beyond that. So if you try and move into, I think, specifics about personality of individuals, that's where a lot of people are going to start to raise maybe some red flags on the whole process. But before we do that completely and switch to the critique, I do want to take a moment to at least help everyone. You may already know this, some people listening, but a lot of people probably do not, that in the ancient world, there's a very different cosmology. Their view of reality is quite simplistic compared to today. So, for example, you could have something very, very simple where you have just like a 3-story universe model. Earth is sort of a flat disk. You have an underworld, like subterranean cave system, right? Then you have a dome in the sky or something like that. Even mentioned in the Bible, right? The firmament, it's like holding up the heavens type of thing. That's a really simple model. As time goes on a little more though, and we get into more, maybe about approximately 2,000 years ago, give or take, you're going to have different models, and you're going to have like emanation models and views of the cosmos that normally have like the number 10 associated with it. And you're going to have the Earth at the center. So imagine you've got the Earth, right? A geocentric, not heliocentric model. The Earth is where everything is effectively revolving around. And then you've got like the sun, the moon, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, right? Venus, Saturn. You got all those planets up to Saturn. But then there's no knowledge beyond Saturn of any other planets. That doesn't come until much, much later. So Saturn's kind of like, responsible for the end, like for death, and it gets associated with winter season and stuff like this. Beyond Saturn, though, you have other things still. You've got the realm of the fixed stars, right? Like the zodiac, which are are sort of these fixed constellations, right? Moving around, as opposed to the planets, which are more wandering, right? Wandering stars type of thing. Beyond the zodiac itself is where you have one or two things. A world soul, maybe, as an option, or nous, like a divine intellect, and then God, period, like beyond that. So what I'm getting at is there could be viewed as like anywhere from maybe like 7 to 10 different levels of the cosmos in reality in the ancient world. And this matters because anything that's inside of the zodiac bubble, let's call it, right, of the 8th sphere, which is the realm of all these fixed stars in the zodiac, is under the control of fate. At least that's going to be when we get to more like kind of like a Greco-Roman time period. So I think that hopefully that helps to give a little more context for how the people in the ancient world might have been, understanding this. And it relates into a lot of various religions. If you watch my Gnosticism video, groups like the Gnostics that are elite think that only they can basically go beyond the fate, basically, and beyond the zodiac and return to a realm of pure light that they are uniquely qualified to do. Whereas other people are going to be stuck under the sort of umbrella of the zodiac and fate. Okay. So that's a little bit of both definition, a little bit of history, some of the pros. Okay. And now we can look at the cons. I think the first thing I want to talk about for sort of going against all of this is to bring in other cultures. There's something called Vedic astrology that's also quite old. Goes into within Hinduism and going back in 2,000 plus years, where studying the stars and mapping that onto personality traits and life events and all that exists in India. In China, there's a very sophisticated system as well of astrology. The trouble is the Chinese system is very unique and different on how it's structured and modeled. The Vedic one is different. The Western one is different, even very different from the other two. So you'd think there should be some maybe uniformity that would have developed, but these are for a long time relatively isolated cultures, so perhaps not. But today, in the 20th and 21st centuries, you still have these sort of camps of like, you could go to a more Chinese set of astrology, Vedic, or Western, and you're not going to get this same answer or breakdown in terms of charts and stuff like that, for giving you like action guidance. And that does seem troubling because it's like, are any of them right? If so, is one more right than the other? Is there like a hierarchy, or are they all sort of effectively guesswork sort of thing? So that's one big issue. A second sort of powerful critique actually goes back to ancient Rome, where Cicero pretty much, almost shreds or annihilates the whole view of astrology. And this is thousands of years ago. But his arguments are pretty good and they still apply. One thing that he brings up that's really important is sort of like a twin type of paradox, which is, why is it that, you have twins, they're effectively born at almost the exact same time, right? Yet they can be radically different, right? If it's all based on like where the stars and the planets were in which houses and positions, like at your birth, say, right? It seems like they should be pretty much the exact same, but we know through countless examples that they're not. So that's one kind of powerful argument against the view that right? For astrology's usefulness for like personality traits, say. I mean, that might say nothing for like predicting terrestrial events that could occur, but for personality traits, it seems like a pretty good point to bring up. Cicero also is going to make this case that like you're dismissing the role of parenting and medicine, just as two examples that could significantly alter your fate, if you will, or at least your destiny. How's that? So those are important factors. He even goes on to state stuff like, hey, the moon is pretty close, so the moon makes sense, right? Like maybe that could have some sort of effects on us. But Saturn, say, right, that's really far away. And although it's big, right, like Saturn's pretty big, Jupiter's big, they're still very, very far away. And it seems a bit unreasonable that they would somehow be able to have some strong role to play, right, on our lives and in dictating things. We could counter that if we wanted to and talk about stuff, even like rare alignments of the different planets or other sort of rare events that a lot of people do attribute personality changes to. Something simple like a full moon and the whole kind of like lunatic, which of course has been argued that both ways. But, the idea that people might be crazier at certain times during certain cycles of the moon, or something like a blood moon, this idea of like bad omens that, hey, even in my personal life, I will confess to not being a huge fan of astrology, but anecdotal and possibly just coincidence, but I've had a lot of bad things happen when there's the whole blood moon phenomenon. So, we can all, I think, be compelled by some of this stuff. Last two things really quickly. Horoscopes, like a birth chart especially or something. I think a couple things to state here. One, who really originally dictates that if you're born at this time, at this place, and then these particular planets are in this house or whatever, that therefore, like, this planet is in a 90-degree or something relationship, in a square, if you will, like, to this other planet, therefore they're in conflict. But two other planets that are like 120 degrees separated or something are in harmony. I mean, why? Why and according to whom? There's no real clear answers to, other than just a convention that was made up at some point and then passed on, Otherwise, there's just really no great reason to believe in any of that. So horoscopes, I think are, to be fair, a lot of people take a horoscope and it's like really stripped down. It's kind of like 1/12 or less of like what it could be if you really go to an astrologer, and I grant that. But that's the thing. A lot of people do take an even more simplified version when talking about stuff like astrology. Really, to simplify, this is troubling, and as a con with all of this, especially in the 21st century. Oh, I'm a Leo. Oh, I'm a Gemini. It's on your dating profile or something, right? And then someone's like, nope. It's not compatible. I don't like it. You've never met the person, right? So it's effectively become a tool for discrimination at that point. No different than age or race or, any other thing you might discriminate against. And that happens a lot. And that is troubling. Right? But to cap the video here, right, and the last thing to talk about as it relates to the con side of things for astrology, free will. It either negates the idea of free will, if it's accurate, if astrology and the claims in Western astrology say are correct, or a lot of them are correct, let's say, then that minimizes, at the very least, our free will, if not negating it entirely. And that is troubling. And many, important theologians even have discussed this, going back to Augustine and many others. So that's something I think that we should keep in mind. But please let me know your thoughts. Definitely, I'm always happy if people want to like a video, right? Subscribe, that's great. Appreciate any help for the channel. But let me know what you think in the comments. I always reply. And until next time, let's stay gray until we know more.